Hi guys, in this video we're going to be looking at how to use the empty number line for mental calculations, and specifically we're going to be looking at using it for subtraction. Now if you haven't already seen my video on using the empty number line for addition, that might be a good starting point. Now I prefer to use the empty number line as a mental strategy. I think it is far more effective if we try learning how to use the empty number line purely in our heads. However, if the empty number line is new to you, often it can be better to start off by writing it down until you get used to the concept and are able to perform it mentally more effectively. As with all calculations though, the most important thing is selecting both the strategy that is right for you and the strategy that is right for the problem. So it's about choosing the strategy that is the most efficient way of solving that particular problem. Now, when it comes to addition, we usually start with the biggest number at the left-hand side of the empty number line. However, with subtraction, because we're working backwards, we're going to start way over this side of the empty number line here. And we're going to be working in this direction. Okay, so this sum, nice easy one to start off with, is 98 minus 56. So to start off with, we're at 98. I can easily just subtract the 6 first of all. So like all empty number line calculations, all we do is we basically partition the number, we take off the units, then we take off the tens. So straight off here, I can go from 98, I can take a backwards jump of 6, and I know I'm going to come to 92. From there, all we need to do is subtract the 50. Now, we could, if we needed to, jump back in smaller jumps of 10, so we could do 5 small jumps of 10, so going 92, 82, 72, 62, 52, working down this way. Or alternatively, if we're okay with our mental subtraction, we can easily just jump down in one jump of 50 and know that we end up at 42. Okay, so a very quick mental strategy. Again, just to reiterate, the idea of this is not necessarily to be a formal written strategy, but it's supposed to aid our thinking when we're performing mental calculations. So let's look at a slightly more challenging example. I say slightly more challenging because in this case we're going to have to be bridging a tens gap. So in this case, we're starting with 94, and we're going to be subtracting 67. So I'm going to start off this sum by subtracting the units first of all. Now, there's a couple of ways of approaching this. Perhaps the simplest way, but the way that involves the most thinking, is to just take one large jump of 7 from 94, jumping backwards in a single jump of 7. But for a lot of people, that might be a little bit challenging to start off with. So instead, we can break down this 7. And first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to try and get to an even 90. We're going to aim to get to the nearest 10 jumping backwards. So I'm going to start off jumping backwards in a smaller jump of 4. And that takes me to 90. So the 7 has been split into a 4, and I've used that 4 already, so I know what I've got left now is a 3. So now, I take an extra jump back of 3, which takes me to 87. Next, I can just jump back in this 60 now. So one big jump of 60, and I'm going all the way from 87 down to 27, which is my final answer in this case. Finally, let's look at an example where we're having to bridge not only a tens gap, but a hundreds gap as well. So, starting with 424 in this case, and we're subtracting 267. Now, like before, I'm going to break up this number. I'm going to subtract a 4 first, which takes me to 420. Then I'm going to subtract another 3, which takes me to 440. 417. Then, so that's the tens dealt with. Then I can start the units even. That's the units dealt with. Now I'm going to start worrying about the tens. So I'm at 467. Again, we could just do one big jump of 60. But that might be too complicated to do in one step. I could jump down in individual jumps of 10. So I could do 6 jumps of 10 backwards, going from 417 to 407 to 397, 387. But there's other ways of approaching it as well. What I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to get as close to 400 as possible. So I'm going to take one jump of 10 backwards to get me to 407. And then I'm going to take a jump of 50 back. So my 60 has been broken up into a 10 and a 50. And I now know that I'm at 357. So it's much easier to jump back from 100 or close to 100 than it is to jump from something further on than 100. Lastly, I'm going to jump back in one go, this big 200 jump here, and I know that I'm going to be left with 157. Okay, so, so that is an example of how we might use the empty number line strategy for mental calculations. As I said, we want to be moving away from actually writing this down too frequently, but when we're initially learning, it can be useful to write it down in the early stages, but then aiming to bridge the gap to working towards using it as a purely mental process.